Good morning, everybody. As we don't have the right to be late today, actually, I'm going to go straight to the point. And I'm very happy to participate to this amazing symposium. So my first question will be to Mr. Al-Awhali, who's Deputy Minister in charge of Cultural Strategies and Policies at the Ministry of Culture in Saudi Arabia. And this question actually, and your answer, will give the tone of the whole panel, I think. In a world facing economic, military, and financial crisis, how do you see the role and the meaning of cultural investment, not only at a national scale, but on the international scene?
Thank you, Nicholas, for starting with this question. I believe it speaks to the heart of the role and importance of culture for us as humans and for the human condition itself. Throughout history, whenever humans faced struggles, conflicts, wars, economic collapse, environmental challenges, they have had always searched for something that would unite them, bring them together, and provide them with purpose or meaning or common narrative, and something that would help them keep moving forward, throughout all of the life's challenges. And that core thing had always been culture. Across all of its forms, shared stories, dances, music, rituals, mythology, all of cultural and creative expression. And today, it is the same as well, with all of the economic challenges and even pandemics, environmental issues, some military tensions. Culture is the thing that will bring people together, unite them, and help them be more collaborative as societies and nations. So it is the binding force of the people. It is what help people share between each other, interact, and trust each other. It's not only a binding force, but it is also the driving force. Throughout history, it is what drove people to invent, innovate, and be entrepreneurs, be business-oriented, thinkers, etc. So it always reminds people of who they are and what can they become as humans or when they work together. So if we speak economically, culture is an important contributor to the GDP of the whole world. Estimates show that more than 3% of the total GDP of all countries on planet Earth, that's more than $2.3 trillion, goes into culture. So there is a huge economic impact, millions of jobs. Most of those jobs are going to the youth. And speaking in Saudi Arabia, which is a youthful country, this is a great opportunity for us to provide our youth with that purpose, that drives, and those jobs that will help them be part of the evolution and the civic development that is happening in the country. And that's economically. And if we speak socially, culture builds resilience among the people, and it builds social cohesion between the people when they have a common narrative, a common purpose between them. It fuels their innovation, thinking, and the social cohesion and the community pride. It has always been, if we look at the history, culture has always been the driving force behind all of the development and evolution that happened across countries. And for us here in Saudi Arabia, with our aspirational vision 2030, that we all work toward achieving those common goals, we believe that culture is not a luxury, it is a core of the development and all of the evolution that is happening across many layers and many tracks in the country. That's our belief of culture and its importance economically, socially, and to the people overall.
Renaud Doundioux de Vabre, as a former Minister of Culture of France, you wanted to tell us about some innovative programs that you actually, wanted to notice. Because during this symposium, we have been talking maybe a bit more about infrastructures, the hardware, than the content, which is the software. So you wanted to mention a few of them, including the Louvre Lens, I think.
When I was Minister of Culture in France, I always wanted to convince people that culture is an investment for the future. It was not so easy, because when you speak about medical, scientific research, people say, yes, it's investment. But when you speak about culture, a lot of people say, oh, culture, it's an expense. So I was obliged to be something like a fighter to try to convince people. There is a necessary shift of perspective, is to show what major cultural projects are not just celebration of culture and identity, even it's very important, but there are an investment in the influence, in the attractiveness and development of a region. You know, worldwide, everybody speaks about Halula. 10 years or 20 years ago, it was not in the mind of the people. So it's very, very, very important. But before speaking about the Louvre Lens, just let me tell, in such a period, in such a violent period, that culture is very important because it acts of respect, of diversity, and of peace. And I hope that this conference will bring a lot of hope in that field. We are different, but we are unified by the spirit of human being and, of course, by the necessary fact of peace. It's an investment. That's why I'm thinking about the decision we made with President Jacques Chirac to make the Louvre in the north of France, near the city of Lille, the city of Lens. Maybe you know Lens because of the football team. But now there is a Louvre too. And it was a city marked by unemployment, industrial crisis, and we decided at that time to find the most difficult location to give hope, to create jobs, to make and organize a touristic destination. At the beginning, people say it won't match. Nobody will go there. And in fact, it's a big success. And I think, it's culture is not a part of strategy. It's the heart of the strategy of development, because also for young generation, it has a lot of outcome for education and wellness. So the reason we tried to make this economical development project was the choice of Lens. And the choice of Abu Dhabi was very different because it was a choice for freedom, for respect, for diversity, for cross the borders, and offer mixed exhibition with no split between eras, between civilization, but showing works of art of every part of civilization around the world. It was a great premiere for us, And you do now the same. Beginning of the year, I was in Jeddah for your biennial. I was totally amazed because, you know, you open doors to very different cultures. It was a real dialogue. So it's very, very important because, you know, it creates dialogue, talks, and common will.
Valérie Freland, you are the executive director of the ALIF Foundation, which actually supported 550 more projects in 54 countries, particularly in conflict or post-conflict zones, which is very related to what we talk about. And so how does the protection of heritage inscribe itself between diplomacy on one side and cooperation on the other side?
Thank you, Nicolas, for your question. First of all, allow me to thank the Ministry of Culture of Saudi Arabia for inviting us and for being a very strong support to ALIF. And if you want to see more images and more pictures about what we do, we have a wonderful booth outside, so please have a look. So ALIF is definitely an example of what we can do at the crossroad of diplomacy and cooperation. Cooperation because our main objective is to contribute to the protection of cultural heritage in conflict areas and also since last year to the protection of heritage which is impacted by climate change in vulnerable countries. And so it's a cooperation between different countries and in the cooperation with each country we work with. For instance, I was in Lebanon last week and we tried to work very closely with the needs, with the expectation of the Minister of Culture of Lebanon. Same, I was in Syria last week and we had a long discussion with DGAM, so in charge of archaeology and museum, to see how we can cooperate with them to answer their needs. And it's also diplomacy because at ALIF, what is very interesting is that we set up a small multilateral organization, and I must confess that we have been able to finance and to support 550 projects in 54 countries by consensus. If you look at the ALIF board, we have a mix of public and private donors. We have countries from different areas, countries that can have different views on the conflict, but we have been able to create a consensus for a couple of reasons. First, because we always propose concrete initiative, and when you propose a concrete project, you can't say that it's not acceptable. We never submit political statements. Sometimes I've been criticized for that because some people ask me to take a position on this conflict, on this one, but we never do that, and that's the only way to be able to create a large consensus among our members. So ALIF is definitely, you know, at the crossroad of this cooperation and diplomacy, and they are complementary, I would say.
Giovanna Melandri, you're not only next Minister of Culture of Italy, but you're also currently the President of the Human Foundation and the founder of GSG Impact, which inscribes itself in the sphere of what you call the impact economy. And I would love to hear you about it, and especially about how is it possible to for philanthropy, and not only philanthropy, but also the cooperations between the private and the public. What are the obstacles, and how do you think it could be improved and dynamized?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I also want to add my voice for being very grateful for this conference, and I'm very impressed by the pace and the investment that the Ministry of Culture, and overall the Saudi government is putting into this sector, which is not a sector, by the way. It's, as my colleague was saying before, it's an infrastructure. And it's an infrastructure creating obviously identity, collective memory, but also meaningful, future-oriented cohesion. So I'm looking at this area from many different points of view, because I was a culture minister, as my friend. I chaired for 10 years a big institution in Rome, the Maxi Museum, which, by the way, connecting to some of the things that I've just heard, at a certain point we decided, when I was chairing Maxi, that we wanted to open a new small Maxi Museum in L'Aquila, which had been hit by an earthquake. Exactly in the same kind of approach you were saying. Culture and cultural institution can be drivers for development, cohesion, and social inclusion, and also bringing out areas and territories from difficult moments. But now I'm looking at this area and this sector, as you mentioned, from another point of view, which is the impact investment point of view. And I've been hearing all through yesterday and today a lot of people talking about investment in culture. And I would say that investment in culture is by far the area where impact investment is more relevant. And let me share with you some ideas around this. First of all, what do we really mean by impact investment? We mean investments that are looked at and decided, not looking at the traditional two factors issues of an investment, risk and revenues. You have to reduce risk and optimize revenues, but you look at three factors. So I would say it's a 3D investment. It's risk, revenues, but it's impact, which is defined, which is deliberately considered an objective of that investment. And I think that, if I may, looking at my experience, I think that such an impressive and strong idea for driving and channelizing impact to the private sector in this country, with this pace and with this courage and with this force, can really learn from some of the mistakes we did. I went through a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes was to think that the PPP, the public-private partnership, could avoid or could just be structured as a partnership, and rather than defining at the beginning of the process what the social, the cohesive, the cultural, the inclusive objective of the partnerships are. So you were mentioning philanthropy. Philanthropy is the kind of money that, how could I say, arrives first and has to leave last. Philanthropy is the kind of money that goes where public money is not sufficient, exactly because sometimes public money expenditure in culture is seen as an expenditure and not as an investment. I totally agree with what was said before. That was my challenge as well, with the Ministry of Treasury every day, to prove that investment in culture did produce revenues and did produce a very special kind of wealth, because it's definitely economic wealth, it's definitely job creating, but it's also spiritual, it's also cultural, it's also cohesive. So how do you calculate that? And this is the point I wanted to raise in this context. I think now, and it was not like this when I was culture minister 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we have the frameworks, we have the technical tools to measure the social impact of cultural investment. This is what Human Foundation does, by the way. And I've heard in the former panel that there were people talking about this, and I'm very happy that this concept and this, how could I say, this theoretical framework has now entered the sort of discourse, Main Street discourse around culture. If you triangle public expenditure, public investment, private philanthropy that in a way fills the gaps left by the public, and private investments that by definition needs to create revenues, and you structure these alliances on impact objectives that are measurable and that are defined, I think you can avoid a lot of mistakes. You can reduce, how to say, bad spending, unuseless spending. And so this is what my conclusion is today, working with a lot of organizations that are also in the cultural field, not only in the welfare field, also funds and funds that are involved in the impact ESG ecosystem. And there's been a huge debate, a global debate, also sponsored by the GSG, the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment worldwide, on which standards, which models, which models for measuring this impact. And it is so crucial to have that in mind at the beginning and not as, a side effect. Social outcome of cultural investment is, by definition, the pillar of impact investment. So I think that this country, with its drive and thriving attitude, I mean, we've heard it through these 2 days, in deciding to invest in cohesion. And maybe since I have the word, I just want to add one little thing. I had the extreme honor to be culture minister in a time when multilateralism and across the nation's dialogue around culture was very strong. Multilateralism is not as strong today. Let's face it. So I think that in these challenging times, raising culture as a tool for where diplomacy maybe does not reach is incredibly important. I had the honor to host in Florence at the time with the First Lady Hillary Clinton and the Director General of the World Bank, a great event. This was 2000, on culture diplomacy. I really feel that we have to go back to that sort of momentum. It's not a political thing here. It's it really covers all the aisles of political engagement, but I think it's very, very much needed to restore, and cultural investment can be such an important driver for the soft power that comes with cultural diplomacy.
Well, I feel obliged to bounce on your speech and ask a question that everyone actually can answer. Can cultural capital be measured? And what would be this measure? What is the expected feedback for an investment in a cultural project beyond or besides the economical return? Maybe Mr. Alba?
Yeah. That's a very important question, and Dr. Giovanni maybe mentioned several elements that are important to be measured, because culture is different than any other industry. It's not like medical or industrial or even food and beverage, etc. It is tricky, and we have to develop our own methodologies and mechanisms to measure the impact of culture properly, understanding the social elements, the elements that are related to the politics of the country, and to the long-term impact that all of the country aspire for. So, yes, culture is capital, and Joseph Beuys mentioned that art is capital, but definitely he was pointing to something more than just the money itself, or the P&L, the way the conventional way we look at capital. Culture, as we said, it builds values in ways that we can measure, but there are other elements that cannot be measured in the shorter term. We have to take them into consideration on the longer term with beliefs that if we do that, something great will happen, maybe 5 years later or 10 years later, based on the collective human experience throughout the history and the impact that we believe culture will bring to the society. There are several elements that we can measure, yes, and we currently do measure it in our ministry and all of our activities, and I'm sure all of other countries as well do so. The audience reach, for example, the visitor numbers, the ticket sales, the revenue, the brand visibility, which is important to take into consideration, intellectual property, the spending, whether local or tourism spending, the jobs that are created, whether direct or indirect jobs. These are direct economic measures that we all do measure. There is a science behind them, how to measure them, etc. But also the real power of the cultural investment is in the indirect and the long-term impact of the cultural activities. First, for example, it raises the city branding overall. And we've seen that across many cities in the world. And you mentioned Al-Ula and Jeddah, historical Jeddah, etc. So that's something to be measured. And we have to develop methodologies and mechanisms to measure that. Also, it brings more tourism and more visitors to cities and countries. It enhances the community pride, the belief, the collective memory, collective shared stories that will drive people to be more productive in their societies, to be more committed at their work, to be more innovative in their thinking and in their ways of thinking. And it attracts talents. It attracts different talents from across the world, and we see that in different countries and states across the world, and creative industries and companies as well, and corporations. And it can transform the underused districts or spaces in cities into thriving creative economies. So even for investors who invest in culture, they should look at the broader impact, not the single year's revenue, but the large impact. And we see that in many top corporations in the world. For example, why would Apple TV do that? Why would they have? It's among the top 3 companies in the world. They have margins that are among the highest margins in history of corporations. Why would they invest a lot on Apple TV and keep losing year after years? Because they believe that there is an impact in this investment. There is a brand equity, there is a customer acquisition, loyalty, changing perceptions, and many other direct and indirect impacts that they are definitely aware of, because they are truly just investors. They look at the dollar value, yet they intentionally keep losing with Apple TV. And the same applies to many others like Amazon Prime and many others. So this is, I think, the way we should holistically look at the impact of investing in culture. And this is how we in Saudi, and part of our aspirational look and aspirational Vision 2030, we look at the success in the broader sense. We look at all of the metrics and elements. We do measure KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics on the shorter term, that's similar to the things that I mentioned, yet we measure other elements that are important to the society, to the social cohesion, to the overall evolution and development of the country on the longer impact. And we do develop, like what Dr. Giovanni mentioned, frameworks, which is honestly among the most challenging frameworks to develop. It's much harder than developing frameworks to measure the impact of in the medical field or in the pure financial field or in the, any other fields of investment. It needs to be, because there are many variables that you need to take into considerations in order to measure the long-term impact on the community, on the youth, and the real return of investment in culture.
There is a last question that concerns both of you, actually, Mr. Rونو de Vabre and Valérie Freland. Say, how to strike the balance between heritage and cultural innovation? Or in other words, how can the past help us to define the future?
You know, we never to forget that heritage was created. So we have always that in mind. And when it was created, sometimes there were controversies, it was a revolution, it was not easily to understand. I also believe that heritage sites can be open to contemporary creation. It's a dialogue between periods, you know. We always have the passion to create. Sometimes it creates debate. When you will visit the Cathedral Notre-Dame de Paris, you will be amazed because there are contemporary stained glass windows inside, just recently installed. It creates a lot of debates. But it's necessary to try to maintain this dialogue. Another way to try to combine heritage and creation is the use of new technologies to show the works of art, the details, to put very sophisticated light, to present with beautiful scenographies, Master of Arts, with a new technology system. It creates opportunities and it brings sometimes the young generation to go inside museum, inside theaters. So it's not a fight, it's a reconciliation.
Thank you.
If I may, just two remarks. I would like to go back to what you said because we had a very interesting discussion and I think that we will work together, which is great. At Ali, for instance, we need to have a more precise evaluation of the impact of what we do because we work in very complicated areas. We work in crisis areas. We work in conflict areas. So, of course, it's not the same evaluating the impact of what you do in the cultural field in developed countries and in this crisis area. So we need to develop data, develop case studies, and I hope that we'll be able to do it together. And the second point is that I fully agree with Rونو de Vabre. Innovation and heritage are complementary. At Ali, for instance, we work a lot on 3D documentation, which is a way to contribute to the conservation of heritage. But there is one point for me which is very key. We mustn't forget that we need to develop 3D documentation, but at the same time, we need to work very concretely on the ground. You know, it's very key.
Absolutely. Do you want to conclude briefly, because we're
well, just to catch up on the question on how we measure culture capital. I think that's obviously. I think we all agree that the return on investment (ROI) is not enough, okay, to measure culture capital. And what came to my mind listening to the Deputy Minister, very interesting approach, is that we definitely need qualitative and quantitative analysis that at the end of the process need to be synthesized in a number. You need a number because you need to understand how the process is going, if you're doing better, if you're, and it's not a judgment, it's a real management tool. And the second thing I want to say is that very often true value of cultural capital lies in what it prevents. That is a difficult concept to translate into evaluation, but this is what we are challenged to do. Because if you think about it, culture capital, if the value lies in what it prevents cultural amnesia, it prevents alienation, it prevents polarization, it prevents, at the end of the day, it prevents conflicts. It prevents exclusion. So I think, you know, if we turn the equation around. Yeah, I'll stop here.
And that's a fabulous conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Just to conclude on the importance of looking at the balance between the heritage and the innovation. This is important for us in Saudi. We look at the heritage as something, it's not like a baggage or something holding us back. It's like a springboard that helps us to go to the future, to innovate and to reinterpret everything that we have, the shared stories, the mythology, the identity. So we look at it in a way that like the past anchors us and the innovation propels us toward more prosperous future.
Thank you very much for your fabulous contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Voilà.